Struggling to communicate with your co-parent? That's why Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger was created. It's a communication tool for all co-parents, but especially those who are in high conflict situations. I always tell co-parents who ask, sign up for Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger as early as possible in your separation and divorce process, because you never know when you're going to need a more robust communication tool that allows you to set boundaries on the communication you have with your co-parent. Are you getting messages that look like war and peace? It's not a text message. It's the length of a novel. Set the brief chat limitation in the app and keep those messages short and to the point. It's about the kids, right? Keep the focus there. You can also limit the number of messages you receive in a day and other nice a la carte features meant to bring sanity to your life. You deserve that, and your kids do too. Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger in the Apple App Store and soon in the Google Play Store. Go to peacefulparentapp.com for more information.
This week on Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast.
Somebody signs up, the court orders them to sign up, and they get linked by case number. Once they are linked by case number, they each will deposit money in there. They can't send a message unless there's money in their account. Then the message comes to us. We have an auditor who immediately gets on the computer, audits the message, and forwards the good message to the intended receiver, and the good message along with the unedited message along with some tips gets sent to the sender. It is a teaching tool, and that's one of the things I wanted to make sure that we had in the program.
Welcome to Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast, where we discuss strategies and tips to improve your co-parenting situation, especially if it's high conflict. I'm Bianca Balogh, co-parent, mother, and entrepreneur, creator of Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger app, and believer in turning challenging situations into something positive. This week, we're talking about a service to help co-parents communicate better. It's called ProperComm, and we have the founder, Launi Sheldon, joining us today to tell us all about it. Launi is an attorney who practiced primarily in family law for 18 years. She closed her practice to focus on client preparation for trial, custody evaluations, legal meetings, and other court proceedings. She's not only a lawyer and an entrepreneur, but she also is the author of Custody Evaluation Preparation, which has sold in the United States, Canada, and Germany. Launi, thanks so much for being with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And there is actually one thing I do want to add is I did just publish a book for controlling your own divorce for the Self Represented Litigant.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's awesome. And a lot of times that is needed if you don't have the budget to pay for an attorney, then you're representing yourself.
Right.
How valuable.
Right. About 80% of the people in Arizona and actually the country represent themselves.
Right. So that's great. So links to your books will be in the show notes.
Oh, great.
And today, though, we're talking about ProperComm. Let's just jump right in. Where'd you get the idea for ProperComm?
Well, as you stated, I'm a family law attorney, and I had clients who just received a lot of abusive emails, text messages, and some of them you want to read in court, you want to let the judge know what is happening and what the communication's like. But at some point, people just want to be done. They want to be done with court. They want to be done with the abuse. And, I had clients that would come in with a 3-ring binder that was like 5 inches tall that would have all their messages that they received from the other person. And so it just, the thought came to me, how many times do you have to be divorced before the abuse stops? And so I thought, there's got to be a gateway to the communication. There's got to be some way to stop it. And so I came up with the idea of ProperComm. Once we kind of got going with it, my then boyfriend, who's now my husband, who's a former judge, kind of jumped in and helped me get the pieces moving. And then I had a couple of other people who helped the process.
What's the deal with people? Like, as much as one party would ask the other party to stop, is there just not an understanding of what is appropriate communication, or what do you see as the problem here?
Well, there's a lot of emotion in divorce, right? I mean, first of all, the divorce is emotional. A lot of times if people could communicate in the first place, they wouldn't be divorced. So some people just didn't know how to communicate to start out with. Then you add the emotion onto that. And that's difficult. I mean, let's be fair. I'm divorced. I'm sure I've said some things that weren't really nice, during that process. But there's a time period. Some people just need 60 days. Some people just need 90 days to get through it. And sometimes they need help, and that's what ProperComm's useful for. There's also people with really serious mental health issues that just are not capable of being appropriate. And so in that case, you have to decide, do you want to limit this person's communication forever? And in some cases, we've had people on for years and years, just because they will never, ever be able to communicate. And then there's also triggers. Every relationship has triggers. Once there's a divorce, there's the new significant other, the kids meeting the new significant other, the remarriage, a new birth, somebody buying a house, somebody going on a big vacation. Those tend to be triggers that cause people to communicate inappropriately, cause them to write, 3-page emails saying what a horrible person their ex is, with maybe one line of importance. And so we charge per word. We charge, $5 for the first 70 words in an email and $1 for the first 70 characters in a text message. And then, $1 for each 70 characters thereafter. And so it really limits the amount of words that people typically use, because they have to decide if calling someone a name or just lecturing someone, for hundreds of words is going to be worth it. Sometimes we get a message for $50. Sometimes they think it is worth it, but it's edited, it's appropriate. We do edit the abuse out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's get into exactly how it works. Is it like a website?
So basically, somebody signs up, the court orders them to sign up, and they get linked by case number. And once they are linked by case number, they each will deposit money in there. They can't send a message unless there's money in their account, unless they're a victim of domestic violence, which we can talk about in a little bit. But then the message comes to us. They get assigned an email address. So it's just a randomly generated email address, which means that the victim of domestic violence can actually have a confidential email address that her ex doesn't know about, because the ex will only be able to send them to the ProperComm email address. It comes through us. We have an auditor who immediately gets on the computer, audits the message, and forwards the good message to the intended receiver. And the good message, along with the unedited message, along with some tips, gets sent to the sender.
Okay, so the portion of the relevant information from the sender is sent along to the receiver, and then the sender actually gets information about how the message was changed so that they can start to learn how to do this better. Is that right?
Correct. So it is a teaching tool. That's one of the things I wanted to make sure that we had in the program. Again, I'm not sure that all these people understand how to communicate appropriately. They've probably been communicating inappropriately for a long time, lecturing each other, nagging at each other, just saying snide, passive aggressive remarks. So we have tips in there that will say unnecessarily argumentative, unnecessary words. There's also things like we have a list of rules. So they get a list of rules that they've got to follow. One is that they don't get to address the person at all. They don't get to use their name. So if I was sending something to you, I would just start with the sentence. I don't say, dear so-and-so. I don't say anything like that. And I did that because I had a client who I was editing his emails to his wife, and he kept calling her by her legal name. So it was what was on the pleadings. So why did I care, right? It was what was on the pleadings. But she hated that name. It was like calling her the C word. She never, ever went by that name, but it was her legal name. And so when I talked to him, he would laugh and he goes, she's so mad. And I'm like, why is she mad? Our emails were perfect. He goes, because I keep calling her this name, and she hates it. And so I thought, how many times is that happening? He was purposely digging at her. It was my client. I had no idea. And I thought, that's one thing that needs to stop. If it's like a Cynthia instead of Cindy, if it's a Stephanie instead of Steph, whatever these names are, if it digs at a person, we want to stop that. The goal is to stop all of that.
Right. Yeah, I remember in my communication with my co-parent, he was very angry about the divorce, and he would say Miss Schroetlin, all in capital letters.
Right.
I had taken his last name, and he was, kind of highlighting that, and that bothered me. Totally see what you're saying there, and not letting them use a name, which is so.
Yeah. So there's a lot of rules like that we do. Signatures, we don't allow it because some of the people are like, I'm a doctor. So they make sure that they sign with, 20 initials after their name. Or even if it says sent by iPhone, does that mean the person got a new iPhone? So we really try and minimize. No signatures are allowed. even the automatically generated ones from cell phones, we remove all of that.
All right.
We just want just the message, and we want just the message to be appropriate.
Yeah. It sounds great. Like you've thought this through a lot. So is this all in the rules? Like when they sign up, they get the rules like this is what we're doing. We're not including this, and this is why.
Right. Yes. And then when they include it, if they do include it, like an email, like a signature, I mean, I still call it a good message, but I say no signature, just to let everyone know, because we do offer a certificate of appropriate communication at the end. And so if they ever reach the end, if they want that certificate, they can ask us for it. So I like to make sure that we know that it was a good message. It was just they had a signature on them.
Yeah.
And if they don't know how to use their iPhone, then that's fine. I also want them to understand that, they can't do this and it's not going to go through.
So I have so many questions for you. So you had said there's a certificate of completion. When do they get that? Is that like a certain time period?
So it's a time period and it's a certain amount of messages. So if there's 20 consecutive good emails in a 90 consecutive day time period, then they can request a certificate and they would be granted one. If there's 40 consecutive text messages or 40 consecutive text messages and emails that are appropriate in a 90 consecutive day time period, then they could also get one.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
So the goal is to get them out. If they can learn to be appropriate, then they can get out, right? I mean, and they can give the court something to look at. And it teaches them to communicate appropriately. I've had people contact me afterwards and saying, hey, I just need more help. Can you help me? And I'm happy to do that.
So they're actually court ordered to use this. They have to use this.
Yes.
Okay. And they come into court, they're in front of a judge, they're having a hard time communicating. There's a record of abusive, nasty messages. And the judge says, you guys need to use ProperComm. You're going to use it. And
then they sign up. And if they don't, if one signs up and one does not, we have a form on there that we will send people to enforce it.
Okay.
To ask the court to enforce it. And we have courts enforce it all over the country.
The other thing I was wondering about is you had mentioned that there needs to be money in their account before they can start sending messages. So
right.
Each party has to put money in order to send. So the more messages you send, the more money that needs to be in it. Is that correct?
Right. We typically start with a $200 deposit. So we request a $200 deposit. If somebody can't afford it, they can contact us through customer service, and we can waive that first $200 fee and let them do like $20 at a time. But we like to start out at $200 so that they can get used to it, get the messages flowing. Unless they're a victim of domestic violence, and if the court has found that they're a victim of domestic violence, they're not charged for any of their messages. We don't audit their messages. They're just pass-throughs, but the abuser's messages are then audited. So it's a free service to domestic violence victims. And that was one of my big goals, is to make sure that victims were protected without having to pay for it. I didn't want them to have to come out of pocket to be protected when really we're only editing the other party's messages.
Okay, right. So the abuser has to pay for it.
Correct.
And they're audited.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about the auditors. Who are those people?
So I'm one. My husband is a former judge. He's one. And then we have a couple of retired business people who went through a lot of training. We go through a lot of training because there's a lot of, we really want to make sure that stuff doesn't go through, right? That's abusive. So there's a lot of training. We want to make sure that they're focused. But, even with thousands of clients, they don't send messages every day. So it's not difficult. We don't need tons of people at this time to do it. When we need more people, we'll probably get more retired judges.
Uh-huh.
It would be my guess.
Yeah.
More retired judges, more retired lawyers, people who just want to make some money, while they're, because you can do it from anywhere. You can do it. You do it on your phones, you do it on your computer, you can do it on your tablet. So it's a really easy system to do, to edit. And so, yeah, right now we just have retired professionals and of course me.
And so can anyone sign up for it, or does it need to be court ordered?
Anyone can sign up if the other side wants to, because they have to be linked. So that's one area that's, it's problematic for say, DV victims who have the criminal court want to order it, for instance, as a release condition. The victim has to sign up too, and they don't have any jurisdiction over the victim in a criminal case. So they can't order the victim to sign up. So that's why it becomes difficult for that. Family court has jurisdiction over both of them and can order both of them to do it.
if there's a situation where there's abuse going on, it's typically one side or the other. Sometimes there's abuse coming from both ends, but again, you have to want to use something like this to fix it. And I'm not so sure that the party who is the abuser, whether it's just one side or both sides, would be interested. That's the hard part.
Sometimes both parties don't know they're abusive. So for instance, one party will say, hey, I'm tired of this abuse, judge, can you order this?
Mm-hmm.
And the other party says, might object, and the court, orders it. And the other party says, well, I want, her to be audited too, or edited too. And the judge, and she's like, oh, I wasn't bad. You look at the messages, yeah, you're terrible. There's a lot of mutual combat. And, one of the things when the judges see these emails, they get stacks and stacks of these emails that are going to be used against them, either party, right? That the judges are going to use as evidence. And, it's a lot. So they see it, they see the abuse. They're not, they're not idiots. They see that the abuse is coming from both sides. And most of the time, I think it really does. Mm-hmm. We always say Mother Teresa doesn't, marry Hitler, right? So, that happens sometimes. Sometimes you don't really know who you got married to until it's a little late. Sometimes there's some abuse, but most often than not, it's mutual. But when it's not, I definitely want to have that domestic violence victims have a pass-through and be protected.
I'm guessing there has to be some degree of proving that they're a victim of domestic violence, or how is that proven?
Yeah, just the messages. If they can just show the court the messages that they're getting, it doesn't matter to me why the court orders it that way, if that makes sense. If we get an order that says somebody's a victim, then they're a victim. And we don't do any further checking. Sometimes we tell the people maybe they need to go back and ask the court to, find them be a victim so that we can do it for free for them. We will do that also.
Yeah.
But if the court orders both people to be edited, then we don't have, the ability to stop that. They need to go back and do that.
Yeah, because domestic violence includes the messages, right? A lot of times I think we think domestic violence is like physical violence, right, physical abuse, but just the messages are enough to be.
Right, harassment.
Right.
Harassment is considered domestic violence, at least in Arizona. And so it's usually enough to show some of the messages that they've received to say, I'm a victim. This needs to stop. Usually it just takes some messages like that.
What are the benefits to co-parents? You had mentioned that it teaches them. Another one, though, that I saw is that it lowers legal costs.
Right. So, think about it this way. When a victim of the abuse, with the abusive messages, is just being pounded by messages. There's two options. They can either suck it up or they can go back to court, right? That's really their two options. And so often victims just suck it up and take it. If they go back to court, what are the options there? Have the judge point, his finger and wag it at them and say, don't do this again, or have the judge order ProperComm. When the judge orders ProperComm, we eliminate the abuse. So it's not as if there's any abuse to go back to court for. We actually eliminate it. And I'll give you an example. We had a customer who wanted to go to the zoo with her kid. And no matter where she went, her phone was getting blown up. She would get 100 texts if she was out. Certainly if the man who was the abuser in this case, if he thought that she was on a date, her phone didn't stop blowing up. Your child this, your child, especially if he was babysitting, right? But in this case, she just wanted to take her kid to the zoo, and she was able to after ProperComm without the interference, because he didn't want to pay $1 for every message. He didn't want to spend $100 blowing up her phone. And then having evidence of it, and really having most of them rejected, because we could reject them too. And so she sent us a message saying, thank you. You gave me my life back. I actually can go out in public and not have my phone just ringing off the hook from texts.
Yeah, that's amazing. You brought the peace back to her life so she could start living it again. I totally get that. So I wanted to ask you, how quick are the responses? How quick are you delivering messages? You know what I mean?
They're pretty immediate. There's times clearly that, if there's a lot of things going on, if there's an outage. So we ask to allow for 2 hours, but they're usually within 30 seconds. Even at night, we have alarms that go off when they happen at night. So we have a beeping that can happen, so it's 24/7.
Gotcha. And so is it just judges in Arizona, or are you all over the country, or?
We're all over the country. We've had some people, I think in like New Zealand, anywhere that there's English speaking at this point. We have some in Canada. We talked about Megan earlier. Megan has talked about ProperComm in Australia. She travels to Australia quite a bit. We don't always see who hooks up because once they're hooked up, they're in the process. So it's not like we go digging to find out.
Right, because they're court ordered and they come in with their number, right?
Right, they're in with a number.
Great. So what's the next step for ProperComm? Are you building out at all, making any new changes, or?
I'm looking at getting an app built to make it a little more user friendly. Maybe add a couple of a calendar or something, maybe a shared calendar, things like that. It's really kind of a simple process that doesn't take much else, right? I mean, we just really want to eliminate the abuse. And so there's not much further that we can go other than making it more user friendly. And maybe adding a couple of elements like, we're not there yet, but that's the intent, is to add things that make it easier, like an app so that somebody could just pay $10 a month, but have the ability to just say, yes, no, I'm 15 minutes away, or press a button for a location, things like that, just to make it easier. Nothing gets edited. It passes through us. We don't even have to look at it because we know it's an automatic response.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to add about ProperComm, or any questions that I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things that I probably should have made more clear. One of the things that we do is if there's a threat, we send it through immediately. We don't edit it. And we let both parties know that it was sent through as a threat, that we saw it as a threat. And we did that because we don't believe that we are in the best position to determine where the parties are, if that makes sense, and to make sure that we keep them safe. So we believe that the victim is the best person to keep herself safe. So we get that message to her or him immediately if there's a threat. And we also reject messages if there's no point to it, if it's uneditable. So things like that we also do. It happens. The people typically aren't on there getting edited because they're, really good at communicating and, don't have some kind of emotional issues at some point. So we make sure that they get the meetings or the message immediately. And we also have a complaint process, right? If somebody thinks that we don't do it correctly, we have a group of us that looks at the messages and says, yeah, that probably was okay. Some things we assume are bad and they're not meant to be bad, right? Because, if somebody says, have a good day, that could be, have a good day, but it also could be, have a good day, right? So, depending on what else is in the message, we may delete that and somebody could come back and say, look, I was just saying, have a good day. And I'd say, all right, you're right. But what we try and do is make sure that there's no snottiness, that there's no condescending or passive aggressive language. And sometimes passive aggressive language isn't even passive aggressive language, right? Sometimes I, because of my job, might read it as more passive aggressive than somebody meant it. So in that case, it might be edited. Sometimes if we let something go through because, like, say that they have a good day and it was snotty, that person can come back to complain. We give them tokens, we apologize, but nobody's perfect. We're just doing the best that we can to edit the messages, and we want to make sure that everybody's heard.
Sure.
In the event that there's an issue.
Yeah, that's great. And no sarcasm. I know that was definitely one that, it still happens, but it's so unproductive. And so sometimes it's hard to pick up on that, I'm sure, as an auditor.
Right.
Is it sarcastic? I'm not sure. And we're just going to leave it out.
Yeah, most of the time, it's the messages are supposed to be about the kids, period, or possibly a financial issue. Anything that they would be required to talk about. If somebody's talking about anything other than that, if somebody's talking about how you look or, what you were wearing or who you were with, no, none of it's going through. We don't like the new significant others mentioned at all. Sometimes they have to be mentioned if somebody's picking up a child or something, but typically we try and keep that out. Like, me and my new wife are going here, no, I'm going here. You know what I mean? So we try and take out anything that would be hurtful.
Yeah, I just congratulate you on your success in getting this out there. And how long has it been in existence anyway?
So we've been out there since, I think we started in 2014 for some reason, like January of 2014. Typically what we do is we go to conferences to promote our product to attorneys and judges. Right now with COVID, that's out of the picture. So yeah, and then we got the patent. I think I got the patent in 2019. So it took that long. It literally took from us trying to get the patent starting in 2012, I believe.
Yeah.
To 7 years to get the patent, and it got rejected several times, and then it got put back in. And so, yeah, we finally got it. It was a fight, an expensive fight, but we got it.
Again, congratulations to you. You know, the more solutions out there to help keep the peace between co-parents, I'm all about letting people know about it. So thank you so much for being here and telling us about ProperComm.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Peaceful Co-Parenting Podcast. I hope the time was well spent and you got a lot out of the episode. If so, please rate and review the podcast. I would really appreciate it. If you're interested in sending me a feedback message, asking a question, suggesting a podcast topic or guest, or downloading Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger as a tool for better communication with your co-parent, go to peacefulparentapp.com or see the links in the show notes. Have a great week, and as always, stay peaceful.
This episode of Peaceful Co-Parent was brought to you by the Equal Shared Parenting Program. Do you find that you're ever in need of someone to talk to, like a counselor or a therapist? How about legal advice? If you've looked into it, you know these services can add up financially. That's why the Equal Shared Parenting Program exists, to help parents be their healthiest holistic selves. It's a membership program that offers discounted and free services like behavioral health, free tax prep and advice, and access to financial education and credit counseling, all for the low price of $29.99 a month. Learn more about the Equal Shared Parenting Program by going to equalsharedparentingbenefits.org/PCPM. The PCPM stands for Peaceful Co-Parenting Messenger. That's equalsharedparentingbenefits.org/PCPM.